case you don't watch sports or you haven't watched the news recently, the Boston Red Sox are world champions. Now, it hasn't always been success for the Boston franchise. In fact, most of their history is filled with negativity and losses. Today we're going to touch on that just a little bit. Let's get to know the Boston franchise from the beginning. The Boston Red Sox franchise, as we know them today, was actually originally formed in Toledo, Ohio in 1893, where they were a part of the Western minor league system for the major leagues. They moved to Boston in 1900, and where they were named the Boston Americans until 1907, when they got enough letters in the mail and people complaining about, you guys are always wearing Red Sox, why not change your name to the Red Sox? And the reluctant owner said, alright, fair enough. So they changed the name to the Boston Red Sox in 1907. For their first 18 years in Boston, from 1900 until 1918, they won 5 World Series championships, including the first World Series that was ever played in 1903 when they were still the Boston Americans. In 1912, Fenway Park opened, which is the stadium that they still use today. It's the oldest stadium in professional baseball. It's going on 101, 102 years coming up next season. So that stadium's been around longer than most of us, all of us. It's infamous for having a green monster in left field, a 35-foot tall wall that robs people of home runs all the time. And they also had a little guy named Babe Ruth. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. I certainly had to do my research on the guy. I guess he was a pretty big deal. He actually, although he's famous for being on the New York Yankees, he was made famous by the Boston Red Sox. He was a part of their team from 13 until 1918, where he won multiple World Series titles with them. After the 1918 World Series championship, the Red Sox sold him to New York, the New York Yankees, for $100,000 to fund the owner's wife's musical. Questionable call, greatest player of all time for his wife's musical. You be the judge on that. But since then, since 1918 until 2004, the Boston Red Sox did not win a World Series title, much of which is blamed on selling Babe Ruth, known as the curse of the Bambino. But let's get on to those middle 86 years. Like I mentioned, they did not win the World Series from 1918 until 2004, despite making it to the playoffs 10 times, and furthermore making it to the World Series 7 times. You would expect a team that makes it to the World Series 7 times is bound to win one of those 7 World Series. These Red Sox did not. They couldn't pull the trigger. Most of the time they lost in heartbreaking fashion, including Bill Buckner's infamous play in 1986, a ground ball through him at first base, field it, you win the World Series, goes right between his legs. A very routine play that he's made a million times. Doesn't make it. They lose the World Series. They had plenty of Hall of Fame players that we still recognize and talk about today. Ted Williams, Dwight Evans, Jimmy Fox, Carl Yastrzemski, all these guys, Orlando Cepeda, guys that we still talk about today as being some of the best players of all time, and yet they could not win the World Series. And this all led up to 2003, where they once again lost in heartbreaking fashion to the New York Yankees. But then came 2004. In 2004, they had a revamped roster, a young and energetic general manager who wanted to get things done, so he made some moves. They brought in some talent, they brought in some veterans, and they actually became the first team in Major League history to pull off the next stunt that they're going to do. They made it to the playoffs. They played the Yankees, like always, and they lose the first 3 games of the series, and everybody thinks they're toast, and it's just like every other year. But it's a best-of-7 series. The Red Sox won the final 4 games of the series. They won 4 in a row. No team had ever done that in history. To beat the Yankees, to go to the World Series, they finally won the World Series by beating the St. Louis Cardinals. Their first World Series title, like I said, since 1918. We can attribute some of the information we've learned today from the Fenway Ticket Office and also from the Baseball Reference Encyclopedia. Some very excellent resources for baseball information. But more recently, they also won the World Series in 2007, and of course, like I mentioned, in 2013, just last week, in fact. So they are a series on the mend. If you can imagine, 86 years without winning a World Series, and then winning 3 times over the last 10 years. So they have definitely beaten the curse of the Bambino. And that's just a brief look into the Boston Red Sox franchise history.